In just under 6 months, we took our air duct cleaning company from doing a little over $150,000 a month on average to doing just under $350,000 a month on average. And we about doubled the net profit in the meantime. And this did not happen on accident. And it didn't happen probably the way that you think. It was not because we worked harder, it was because we worked smarter. We were very, very strategic about setting up the right systems and accountability in this business in order for it to be able to grow without us putting more of our time in, because our ultimate goal is to make this a sellable asset. Whether we decide to sell it or not, we want to be able to sell this business and have the ability to do so, have the option to do so. And because of that, it cannot depend on us. So if you're looking to remove about 30 to 40 hours a week from the time that you're putting into your home services business, this is going to be kind of an in-depth breakdown on how we've done that and how you can do that too. I'm going to break down the exact 12 steps of realization change and actionable tactics that you need to take to get to that next level. I'm going to use both examples from what we've done in our business and also examples from how we helped a client recently with a granite countertop installation business get back some of her time and why. So the first thing I want to talk about is the core problem that you have. I have to find a good marker here. Something that actually works. So the core problem that you probably have right now, if you are somewhere between $100,000 a month and $200,000 a month in your home services business, is owner bottleneck. So the granite countertop installation business that we worked with recently actually came to us at almost exactly $100,000 a month. She was struggling to really break past that plateau. She's an excellent, excellent salesperson, but she was doing way too much in the business. And this was just really too much of a difficult situation for her. Now, for the first few years of running the business, this was totally okay. She was totally willing to put in this time and really almost have no life outside of this. But then she got very serious with her significant other, and she came to us because her significant other had moved to a different state, become a long distance relationship that she wanted to keep and develop, but she couldn't do that while also working at this pace. So she was getting burnt out and the business was starting to backslide a little bit. And so we wanted to help her be able to make that same amount of money or more, ideally more, to be able to satiate her personal needs, her personal income needs, and keep the business running, but without coming at the expense of this relationship that she wanted to keep developing and make the time for. And what was wrong in her business is it just depended way too much on her. It just had way too much of an owner bottleneck, meaning she had to make most of the big decisions on a day-to-day basis and do most of the main core activities in the business. So if she did want to leave for even a weekend, much less a week or two, to go spend some time with her significant other, the business was going to suffer and stop making as many sales as it needed to. I'm gonna switch colors here again because my marker's dying. But that's the core problem that you need to identify in your business. Is it depending too much on you? And the odds are, if it's doing under $200,000 a month, it probably is depending on you too much. And we're gonna break down what the steps are that you need to actually go through to be able to get rid of this. Now, the first thing that you're gonna have to do is a mindset shift. I know this sounds cheesy, and this is not gonna be a video all about mindset, I promise you, but it is a key and pivotal part of this. You need to shift from operator to strategist. Right now, you're probably just blocking and tackling. Maybe you've got this kind of superhuman ability to just do a ton of work in one particular workday and you're amazing at what you do. But the issue is that that can only go so far. Your time is going to max out. If you try to just have this superhuman heroic effort, you're not going to be able to get yourself out of that kind of bottleneck that you're in. Now, I want to talk a little bit about our client, Anna, making this shift. So what she was doing was she was managing the sales, the marketing, and overseeing the production of her business. And when you have a home service business, we like to kind of like simplify it. It's not quite this simple. There are other areas of the business, but two of the most key areas on the day-to-day operations are the sales and the production. You sell something and then you deliver on it. It's fairly simple when it comes to that at this size of business, at least. And so she was really overseeing both of these. So the first shift that she had to make was a willingness to be able to hand off some of the responsibility of those things to other people. And we're gonna get into what that looked like a little bit, but she had to make this shift in her mind from operator to strategist. Really for her, it came completely out of necessity. She was not going to be able to keep up and develop this relationship that she wanted to if she was still stuck being the operator. That brings me to what we ended up doing with her very early on, which is we audited her time. And so if you're in this position, the next thing you need to do is you need to audit your time. Take an honest accountability of what are you doing on a day-to-day basis and a week-to-week basis. And if you're doing all of the sales, like many people at this level of business are, if all the sales are falling on you, even just the closing part of the sale, that's an issue. You're gonna need to bring someone else in to really make room to get up to that next level. If you're overseeing the entire production and the logistics around it, also going to be an issue. And you're going to have to just make a list of what you do. So what I recommend you do here, if you have the luxury of having someone in your business that can kind of follow you around for a week, I would recommend, maybe even a family or friend member, I would actually recommend bringing in someone, and this is something that we do to help our clients as well. So if you'd like to see exactly what this would look like with us, you can book some time to find out what we do in your business right at the link in the description below. But I would actually recommend bringing in someone and just having them shadow you and kind of ask you questions throughout the week and start to develop this list of like the actual activities that you're doing. Maybe it's going and doing estimates for a particular client, or for your clients to come up with the pricing for whatever the service is. And maybe you're doing kind of day-to-day communication with whoever's doing the labor to make sure that it's going off properly. You're doing the scheduling for them, communication, paying them, all this stuff. And have that person make that list for you. Now you can do this yourself, but the reason I recommend you have someone else do it is because it's very difficult to be objective about what you're doing. It's also difficult to do it as well and at the same level that you're already doing it while also kind of taking note of it. You know, you kind of have to have two brains operating at once. And so this is usually the first thing that we do whenever we work with a client is we kind of make a list of whatever they're doing and just audit their time, and just we're very comprehensive. The next thing that you have to do is you have to, number 4, you have to decide what to stop doing first. So there's no exact science to this, but I'll use the example of Anna again. The first thing that we decided we were gonna have her stop doing is the sales. Now, to get to that point, the first thing that we had to do is we kind of had to get some transparency and like visibility of what's going on in place. So we actually brought in an admin in her business that took over the day-to-day. Now, this is because she has a showroom for her business where people were actually walking in. And so she had this very difficult situation where she was having to go out to customers' homes and do these assessments to figure out an estimate and a price of what the service was going to cost and everything. But she also had people walking in that she was missing. So we decided we're gonna have an admin just kind of live, during working hours all the time in the office, in the showroom, be able to take different customer appointments. And we decided to go with kind of a setter closer model, at least at first on the sales side, meaning this admin was going to be focusing on setting all of these estimate appointments for Anna rather than her managing the schedule, setting all of her own appointments, and doing all of her own appointments, which was limiting her to only being able to do a certain amount at once. I'm gonna get into like what we did afterwards too, because we did even more than this. There's another hire involved. But what we ultimately had to do is get this admin trained on how to keep track of all the financials. Now, in Anna's case, she hadn't done any QuickBooks or any kind of financial accounting of any of her numbers for the past few years that she'd been running the business. And so we had to actually start there and, get her caught up for about a few years of QuickBooks just so that she can actually know what she was making, and so that there's kind of like goals to strive for and to understand. So if you're not doing QuickBooks, this is like the very basics of running a business, but you would be surprised at how many business owners I've seen and talked to that are doing well over $1 million a year, maybe even a couple $1 million a year, that are not keeping up with QuickBooks on a regular basis. So we got the admin used to doing that. That was her first task every morning. She was there to take any incoming appointments, and then anything that came in online, which is the primary source of how potential leads and customers came in, she would field those calls, call people that submitted lead forms from online marketing, and actually set those appointments with Anna. The next thing that we did is we actually ended up hiring a salesperson to actually do the assessments and the estimates. We actually decided to hire someone who had been in the industry for a while and was doing a very, very high volume of sales. We were able to offer him a more competitive compensation package than he was currently getting at his other job. And so that made it attractive enough for him to come to this smaller business and just completely take over all these assessments and estimates. So imagine at first Anna is spending all of her time handling all of these logistics around both the scheduling and the actual labor of doing the job. But the scheduling of all of her assessment appointments, the follow-up, the payments, all of that, we took all of these logistics of what she was doing off of her plate, put them on this admin's plate, freed up probably a good 30 hours of her week just there, something 20 to 30 hours of her week just there. And then we hired a salesperson to actually follow up with all the leads, do all of the assessments in person in homes, create the estimates for them, carry them through. And so maybe that's a little bit of less money in the meantime because there's a little bit of a salary that comes with that. But imagine all of a sudden Anna is freed up with probably a good 40 to 50 hours of her week at least. And each of these people has an additional 20 to 30 hours on top of what they freed off of her plate that they can contribute to just getting better and better at this core function of the business. So imagine just the bandwidth of increase that this business now has. And she's now got 40 hours of her time back that she can either relax, build this relationship, or if your goal is to keep growing the business, she could bring that time back into growth-minded things that I'm going to get to later in this video. So the next thing that you have to do if you're in this position, after you decide what to stop doing, is you have to decide what to do instead. So number 5, you have to focus on other things, because to get different results, you have to do different things. The things that got you from 0 to $150,000 a month or so in your home service business are simply not going to get you from 150 to 350. It's as simple as that. You have to do different things. So what are some of the things that we actually instruct people to do instead and that we focus on these days? You have to focus on, really it boils down to things like strategic partnerships. So if you get a lot of referrals from a certain kind of category of business or referral partner, going out and meeting more of those people, developing those relationships, keeping in contact with them, doing things for them, maybe giving them referrals. You need to spend time doing that. You need to spend time honing in on the marketing, making sure that your marketing is getting better and more profitable, whether that's Google ads, Meta ads. In Anna's case that I was talking about, she does both. So now she's focused on increasing that ad spend to give more opportunity for her salespeople. You need to focus on creating systems, which I'm going to talk about later in this video. You need to focus on the vision of the business, where you're trying to go, meaning you're setting goals with your people. You're continually monitoring those goals and seeing whether you're sticking to them. And then you need to focus on developing leadership positions. So these leaders that you put in place, this sales leader that she put in place, she's now focused on developing him. How can she help him get better from a leadership perspective? Leaders need to lead leaders. As the business owner, you are the leader of leaders. I want you to think of it that way. Now, once you get to that point, number 6 is what we call departmentalization. So number 6, you're going to start focusing on departmentalization of the business. Now, what does this actually look like? You have to break the business into units. Now, when you break the business into units, you might be wondering, what does that even mean? You need to break the business into units by both the service and the functions. Now, you might be a home service business that does only one kind of service, but in my experience working with a lot of different businesses, I've found that that's pretty rare actually. Usually they're doing at least a few different kinds of service. So when I say break it into departments by service, I mostly mean financially. Whether you're doing all of your own QuickBooks, your own financial tracking, or you have someone in the business that's doing that for you, one of the next steps that you're gonna have to do to really get to that next level is start understanding which service lines are your most profitable. So I use the example of us actually. We have both a residential department and a commercial department in our business. Now the residential is newer, much smaller. The commercial unit is probably about 6 times the size of it right now. But regularly our financial manager actually breaks the two of them into their own categories so that when we look at a profit and loss statement for the business, we see which one is more profitable and why. And we can put more focus on whichever one is growing more quickly, is more profitable, and maybe has other circumstances that are leading to us like deciding that we should put more focus on it. So that's breaking it into units by service. Now, you also have to break it into units by function. Now, I talked a lot about these kind of the sales side of things versus the production side of things. In our business, in our air duct cleaning business, we have someone who is the sales leader and we have someone who is the production leader. So the sales side actually does not have to focus much on the delivery of the service. They get to focus on just continually bringing new service in. And the production manager doesn't have to focus much on sales. She gets to just focus on making sure that everything gets delivered properly. And the beauty of that is most businesses at these kind of lower levels, maybe between 100 grand and 200 grand a month on average, most of them have this kind of seesaw thing that happens where either you're making a ton of sales one month or you're managing all the sales that you make. And this is really bad between $0 and $100,000 a month, but it's usually still present between 100 and 200. And to get rid of that seesaw and have that consistency, you really have to have someone that's leading both areas. You need to make sure that everything that you're selling is getting delivered on continuously, but you also need to make sure that whenever you have a lot of jobs going on, maybe you get a bunch of jobs at once, you need to make sure that someone is always selling and always keeping the sales pipeline full for new work coming down the pipeline, or else you end up in these situations where you're a couple months down the road and you're just out of work, you have to go win the work again, and that's lost revenue and lost profit. So departmentalization by service, by functions. The next thing that you have to do is you have to start developing your leadership engine. Your leadership engine. Now I'm going to go back to these two different areas, sales and production, and we're actually going to take this a step further as well. So the first thing that we had Anna get in place is the sales leader, someone that could completely take over all of the sales between the admin and the guy doing all of the assessments. She had this completely covered. She really doesn't have to worry about it as long as they're doing their jobs. Now, the next thing that she's focusing on is the production manager. She's kind of servicing the production side more and more, but she's now finding a leader to lead that. Now in our air duct cleaning business, we actually have a production manager already, and we have someone who's leading the sales. And in this case, they're actually able to focus on each thing. So we just need to continue developing those leaders. Now, the next step for us, and this is something where we're kind of in this gray area right now, this is probably gonna be what will get us to $500,000 a month and beyond, is actually having someone above these two positions. So you have your sales and your production department. Now you need to have either a director of operations, a COO, chief operating officer, or a general manager. Really doesn't matter that much what you call them. Call them whatever they want to be called to make them feel like they have this great, awesome title. In my experience, titles are overrated, except for just kind of classifying what someone's supposed to be in charge of. But it could be any of these three positions, just someone who's in charge of overseeing both sales and production. And they are responsible for making sure that both are going on at once. Now in our position, we actually do have a director of operations, but he's still the sales leader, and he's kind of monitoring production because of his technical expertise and time in the business. So we're still kind of in this gray area, like I said, but for us, the next step for us to get to kind of 500 and beyond is going to be getting him moved up and then getting a sales leader probably in place under him, or developing someone that's already in the business to be that sales leader. In other cases, it could even be bringing in someone new to put above him and allowing him to develop more and more as that sales leader and just focus on that, not have to think about production either. So like I said, we're in that gray area, but you need to be thinking, how can I develop these people so that eventually I can have these three key leadership positions? So be thinking, do you have someone in your business internally that could get you there? Or are you gonna have to look externally, and you need to start developing your people in order to get them to that point. I'm gonna switch marker colors again here. Hopefully this is the last switch. But number 8, the next thing you need to do is you need to figure out decision rights. Decision rights, what does that mean? What can your leaders do without your oversight? So I'll use some examples here. In our business, we have a rule for our business development manager who works on the sales side of the business, where she's managing, we do a lot of commercial business, so she goes to things like trade shows, she goes and meets people, does lunch and learns and all these different little events. And what we could do is we could require her to come to us every single time she's doing one of these things and get a little small budget approved for it, and us have to have oversight on that. But that would be a lot of decisions that we have to make throughout the week and kind of all the time. So what we've done instead is we've given her up to, I think it's a $200 spend per event or thing that she's doing, where she actually has that budget allocated, where she can make her own decision of what to buy and what to spend on this particular event. What that does for us that's really fantastic is it allows us to not have to have oversight over every single little decision. Now, we do still ask that she tells us when she's spending this money, but she doesn't have to get our approval to make the decision first, and this allows her to move quicker and just do more things. Whenever you're like not allowing your people to make decisions on their own, it just stops progress that they could otherwise be making. Also doesn't really allow them to develop into leaders and future people that are able to function on their own. And you're always gonna have them just coming back to you trying to make decisions, and you're gonna be pissed off because you want to get your time back from this business, but you got people coming to you for decisions all the time. So decide what you're gonna give your people the rights to make decisions about and stick to it. Make it logical. Don't go overboard with this. Don't give people too much autonomy too quickly. Just start bringing it up in steps and kind of build up to it over time. The next thing you need is accountability systems. And this is where I'm gonna get controversial a little bit because not everyone's gonna agree with this, but I can tell you firsthand, it's worked really well for us. What we did here as soon as we came into this business is we put these things called daily reports into practice. These are simply Google forms that every key position in the office, which is now about 6 or 7 people, they all have to do these daily reports every single workday. And it's kind of a checklist of their daily responsibilities, and it's different fields to put in the numbers that they're supposed to be responsible for and the numbers that they're supposed to be overseeing, the actual production of what they do. So if it's sales, it's around outreaches. If it's production, it's around kind of what they're managing and the logistical side of things. And there's notes for them to actually leave commentary of what they did throughout the day for whoever they're directly reporting to. So we have these kind of layers of management. Now, one might consider this kind of micromanaging, but in reality, what we've found is that we don't have to micromanage as much because we know that these daily reports are happening, and whenever they stop happening, we just bring some kind of consequence for it. We had someone in the business recently that was not doing his daily reports, and we had to kind of bring him in and get onto him about it and say, hey, listen, man, you're going to start getting fines if you don't do these daily reports. And he started doing the daily reports right after that. And this is where I don't think everyone's going to agree with that. It might feel very micromanaging, but I can tell you it has had measurable effects for us. And it really helps people. What the staff has kind of told us from doing these is it kind of helps them like have a line of communication with us without feeling like they have to track us down throughout the day. It gives this kind of like dumping ground of their thoughts and what they're wondering, questions they want to ask that they can just kind of save for that daily report every day. And then usually they'll get answers back from us, or they can kind of accumulate that throughout the week or throughout the month and bring it all to us at once if it's not super timely. And it just helps them kind of get their thoughts down a little bit more concretely. The accountability part of it is if you know that you're going to have to submit a daily report every day, you tend to do a little bit more of what you're supposed to be doing in the day, just in the interest of having a daily report that actually looks like you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. So it just creates a good kind of layer of accountability there for everyone involved. And it also creates accountability for us as the overall leadership and for the direct reports that they're reporting to with these daily reports. Because if we're not reviewing these, they're going to probably be wondering why they're not getting their questions answered. So gives us accountability of like reviewing what's actually going on with them. And when we're kind of trying to develop them as leaders, we can point back to things that are happening on these daily reports. Now, number 10 is you need to have standard operating procedures or SOPs to remove key person dependence. And this is going to be removing key person dependence on yourself as the business owner, but also if you've started to have key employees that you just rely too much on, imagine the pressure that you're putting on them. If they don't feel like they can go on a vacation, if they don't feel like they can take time off without the business suffering, imagine the pressure that you're putting on them. What if they do get sick? What if they, God forbid, what if they leave for another job? Or what if they get another position? Or what if you just want to move them up into a new leadership position and have someone else start doing the things that they're doing? You need to start writing out and documenting what the standard is that they have for certain things and creating checklists or guides or procedures of how they do the things that they do so that someone else can later come in and replicate it that same way. Now, what I want you to think of this as is you don't have to have all of the answers for a standard operating procedure before you put it out. This is going to be a living, breathing document. And in our case, they change pretty often. So I want you to think of this as like you're building the airplane while it's in the air. You go ahead and just get started with it, but build the standard operating procedure around what's going on, tweak it, and kind of test things as you go on versus kind of overanalyzing and feeling like you have to have all of the answers before you even put one into place. Now, one thing to note about standard operating procedures is that they are not fully comprehensive. You can't just write out a list or a guide of something and expect that it's going to go that way. And I'll get to the other layer that you have to create a full system with these a little bit later. The next thing that you have to do is think about your personal freedom and decide what the hell you want to do with it. There are different schools of thought here, and ultimately it's about your choice, and your choice should be based around what your goal is as a business owner. There are kind of two schools of thoughts here, like I said, and you can either treat your business as something that's going to be a piggy bank for you, or you can treat it as a continuous growth vehicle. And if you're treating it as kind of like a piggy bank, I'm gonna try to draw a piggy bank here and probably do a terrible job, but this is a little piggy bank. So if it's your personal piggy bank, then you want this to be something that just generates consistent cash flow on a month-to-month basis for you, because maybe you have personal income needs that you just need to make a certain amount to maybe pay off a house, a car, whatever it is that your goal is. So you need to get it to a level where it's producing that amount of personal take-home income for you every month, and you're probably gonna take most of that personal income and actually use it for your personal expenses. But if instead you want to be in the sport of business and just keep growing it. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with either one of these approaches. These are different goals for different people. But if you want your business to be a continuous growth vehicle and you want it to keep growing every single month, you have to think about that. You're gonna have to take less cash out of the business every single month for your personal expenses and leave more in so that you can reinvest and reinvest and reinvest and reinvest every month into these different initiatives, like hiring new people or paying for some kind of advisory or consulting or paying for some kind of marketing system or paying for new equipment that is going to help you do more quicker. You need to be able to reinvest in these things, and if you're treating it as a piggy bank, that's not going to work. And if you need it to be a piggy bank, you're probably not going to be able to do this. So you need to choose between one of the two and just figure out how that relates to your personal goals and just stick with it from there. And maybe you treat it as a growth vehicle for a while and you get to a certain point where you're like, all right, I want to go back into piggy bank mode and I'm happy with making this much. That's totally fine. Maybe you get to a certain amount that can support your family or where you're trying to go. Again, nothing wrong with that. People have different goals in business. Now, the last thing, the 12th thing for you to do is figure out what your job, I'm gonna just put new job. You have to figure out and embrace what your new job in the business is. Now, your job really is as a systems engineer. And I mentioned earlier that it's not entirely comprehensive just to build standard operating procedures. The thing that you need to add to standard operating procedures is accountability. So for this to be a full system, you need to be thinking about the people involved and the actual standard operating procedure. And you need to make sure that every time you design a system in your business, there's both the procedure for how to do it, the checklist, the guide, the procedure, but also an accountability mechanism of some kind. Like if someone's responsible for doing something a certain way, but no one is checking on them at all, then how are you gonna know that it's getting done properly? It's just not gonna become a full system that can operate without you. And the whole goal here is creating something that can operate without you. So I'll use an example here back from Anna's granite countertop installation business, kind of what we set up. One of the initiatives, the kind of standard operating procedures that she created, if you will, was she created a pricing sheet so that instead of everything around pricing being in her head, it could be kind of this standard guide that could guide anyone that was out doing estimates and assessments so that they could create their own estimates. So that was the actual procedure part of it, was this pricing sheet, but she still designed it so that there's oversight from her on the actual estimates, that these estimates are still getting seen by her so that she can have final approval. Now, the next step from her, if she wanted to really remove herself from this business, is going to be eventually having a leader above that, or having that person move up into a leadership position so that there's someone besides her monitoring these estimates and giving the final approval on them. But that creates a system where there's this procedure being followed with the pricing every single time the same way. And then there's also accountability to make sure that it's being followed the same way. And once you get all those 12 things done, you're gonna have a lot easier time going from between 100 and 200 grand a month to 250 and beyond. So I hope this helps. Now, if you do want help doing any of these things, we do in-depth audits for businesses that are at this level, and you can book an assessment just to get our view of this and figure out what your business could do to get you to that next level. And if you liked what we talked about in this, I also have a free resource that you can download in the link in the description called the Owner Seat Transition Playbook, or the OST Playbook, that goes over this idea as well as many more of the specifics of what you need to do in order to get your time back and produce more revenue. So download it in the description. And if you liked this video, you should definitely check out this way more in-depth breakdown of exactly how we grew our air duct cleaning business so much so fast by clicking right up here. Subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you on the next one.